Biden has endorsed Kamala Harris. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean for the nominating fight that will now take place over the course of, I don't know, a month? Really less than a month, right? The Democratic National Convention kicks off, I think it's August 18th. It's middle to end of August. But there's a wrinkle in that too, because there are state deadlines to get on the ballot. So the parties need to tell certain states, notably Ohio, who the nominee is before the Democratic National Convention. The Democrats have pushed their convention so far in the year that they are now running into legal problems for ballot access. So back when Biden was the ostensible nominee, there was talk of virtually nominating Biden before the DNC. And so the DNC would just be a show. It would just be theatrics. You'd go there and it would be rather undemocratic. There would be no question about where the delegates would go. There would be no question about fights on the floor. It just would be, Biden would already be the nominee before the convention. What will the Democrats do now? Will they follow Joe Biden and make Kamala Harris their nominee for 2024? And then will they virtually nominate her before the DNC? So there's not even an opportunity for an open convention, not even an opportunity for a floor fight. Here's for blah, blah, blah. That sounds like Joe Biden now. For a floor fight. Peter Piper pecked a pick of pickled peppers. My fellow Democrats, writes Joe Biden, I have decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this. And then it's a picture of Joe and Kamala. Joe obviously didn't write this. I would be real surprised if he felt this. I strongly suspect Joe Biden detests Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris ran against him in 2020, and pretty much her entire campaign was calling Joe Biden a racist. During the brief appearance of Kamala Harris in the 2020 Democratic primaries, Kamala leveled a really nasty attack at Joe Biden, who's a nasty man, so you love to see it happen. But she leveled this nasty attack. She said, Joe Biden opposed busing. Little black girls who wanted to go to good schools had to get on a bus and go across town, and Joe Biden opposed that. And Joe, I was one of those little girls. You racist Joe Biden. And Biden fended off the attack, and then Kamala Harris got out. So then this raises another question. Hold on. Kamala Harris is now going to be, if Joe Biden has his way, the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party without ever having received a single vote while running in a Democrat primary. Kamala Harris dropped out of the 2020 race before the primaries. That's how poorly she ran. Now, she still received some votes. I looked this up because I suppose she was already on the ballot in at least a few places. So how many votes did Kamala Harris receive in the 2020 Democrat primaries? She'd already dropped out before the primary. 844. To be clear, that's not 844 delegates. 844 delegates to go to the convention to try to do... No. It's 844 votes, period. I may very well have received more votes in presidential elections than Kamala Harris did in 2020. I'm not sure. I don't want to presume that people wrote me in, but 844 is nobody. Do you know who got more votes than Kamala Harris in the 2020 Democratic primaries? Julian Castro. Remember him? Probably not. Marianne Williamson, the woo-woo new age guru gal. Cory Booker. John Delaney. Remember John Delaney? No, of course you don't. Andrew Yang, Michael Bennet, Deval Patrick, Tom Stutt. Look at all these guys. Oh, hold on. I want to issue a correction. That's not fair. Those guys did not drop out before the primary. They stayed in the primary. So now I can't be certain that they got more votes because you have to stay into the primaries to even count how many delegates you're going to get. So no delegates, never got a single vote while she was running in a primary. Now all of a sudden, She's going to be the nominee. The woman who only slightly edged out Steve Bullock for just raw votes in the primary came in just a little bit ahead of Joe Sestak, Wayne Messam, and Beto O'Rourke. She's going to be the nominee for president. Doesn't seem very democratic, does it? Then on top of that, yeah, you have to wonder if the delegates are going to follow Biden. So just from a nuts and bolts political operations perspective, now that Biden has dropped out of the race, all of Biden's delegates, which is to say all the delegates, are no longer bound to him. They can follow his lead and vote for Kamala Harris, but they don't have to. They're not bound to follow the lead of the person that he endorses. So probably many of them would, probably the vast majority of them would go with Kamala Harris because they like Joe and for party unity or for whatever, but they don't have to. So is this going to go to the convention and we're going to have a floor fight? I don't know. Or they might virtually nominate her. Is Joe Biden going to give us any guidance on this? Maybe he'll give us some guidance if he addresses the nation later this week, if he's up to it, if he knows that he dropped out. I have joining me now, Charlie Spiering, author of Amateur Hour, Kamala Harris in the White House, a man who picked a really, I was going to say really great subject for a book. Actually, it's a really awful subject for a book, but I hope and expect that he's now going to make a lot of money because all of a sudden, this woman really could end up in the White House. Charlie, thank you for coming on.
You bet, Michael. Thanks for having me. What an afternoon. So is Kamala actually going to get the nomination? Biden endorses her. He has no way of forcing his delegates to go along with it. Are we really going to end up with this lady as the Democratic nominee? Well, it's interesting that you haven't really heard a resounding declaration of support around Kamala Harris, even though I do suspect that she will be the ultimate nominee. Right now, you're going to have a lot of donors fighting behind the scenes, especially the ones that don't want to see Kamala Harris become the head of the Democratic Party. There will be a few conversations behind the scenes trying to open up the process to allow another candidate to come in. But from the very beginning, it's the way this has been set up. This is why Joe Biden was running for re-election in the first place, because Kamala Harris was not ready to run. Kamala Harris wasn't popular. She wasn't resonating with voters. Democrats don't necessarily all rally around her. So this is the reason why he was running for re-election in the first place, and now they're stuck with the ultimate doom scenario.
Well, we will see what we will be unburdened by what has been, or whatever that word salad that Kamala frequently repeats. We will see that. Of course, Kamala has a big advantage here, which is that she's already part of the ticket. She's already part of the campaign apparatus. So presumably it would be easier for her than for, say, a Gavin Newsom or a Michelle Obama, as some Democrats are fantasizing about, to move into that position.
Exactly. Exactly. Take a look at Obama. He's a longtime Kamala Harris supporter, so I fully expect him to back Kamala Harris. The Clintons just came out with a tweet. They endorsed Kamala Harris. So she's already on the fast track to seizing the mantle here.
Do you think the Democrats are going to push back at all, given that they're supposedly the Democratic Party, and yet Kamala Harris has never received a single vote, much less a delegate, while she was running in a Democrat primary? Not one vote.
Yes, I imagine you'll see some grumbling. There may be a movement within the Democratic Party. Hey, let's open up this nomination. Let's bring it to the convention. The Democrats hate that because that means that there'll be an unexpected, chaotic convention. That's the last thing they want to do right now. What's interesting, watch Nancy Pelosi. She's not a big Kamala Harris fan. She knows Kamala Harris. She's worked with her in California. Not a huge fan. So it'll be interesting to see whether Pelosi endorses Kamala or whether she gets on board with the idea of an open convention.
So the question then is, can she really run? I mean, I thought, even as of Thursday or Friday, I would have bet, as I said, a small amount of money that Biden sticks it out and stays in the race, if for no other reason than he had no incentive really to get out, and the other candidates weren't polling better than him. You know, there was an A+ poll that came out just a few days ago that showed that Kamala would lose to Trump, that Gavin Newsom would lose to Trump by a lot, and even Michelle Obama, the fantasy candidate, who I don't think she wants to run. I don't think that anybody really wants to vote for her. Even she was tied with Trump. So if I'm Biden, I look at that, I think, look, I drop out. That it doesn't even give the Democrats much better odds to win. Does Kamala Harris have what it takes to beat Trump?
Well, I think that the Trump campaign has said this over the weekend. They said, we fully expect the mainstream media to give Kamala another chance to make the reboot. And this is what she's already been preparing to do on the campaign trail. Look, I've been watching her campaign events. They're very scripted. They're very disciplined. She's no longer sort of the laughing, cackling candidate that people are used to as vice president. She's really focused on being absolutely perfect, absolutely scripted. But that's the problem, is someone who is that scripted, can they even connect with voters? And voters don't have enough. They haven't, even the Democratic voters haven't warmed up to her in the first 3 years. Who's going to say that in the next few months they'll suddenly fall in love with her? It's really going to take a long time for Democratic voters to get, as they're saying now, coconut pilled. If you support Kamala Harris, you're coconut pilled. You heard AOC mention that on Thursday. So get your coconuts ready. Let's go.
So I feel somewhat vindicated. Years ago, before she even decided to run in the 2020 race, I said this woman has an uncanny ability to rise up the ladder of politics. And so I said, keep your eyes on Kamala Harris. And everyone was talking about all sorts of other candidates. I said, keep your eyes on Kamala. And then she dropped out before the primaries, and I started to question myself. I said, wow, did I really misjudge that? Then she got the VP pick. I thought, oh, no, I didn't misjudge that. She's a good careerist. And now, amazingly, she is within inches of becoming the Democratic nominee for president in 2024, just 3 months before the general election. Some people have pointed out that her rise in politics has been somewhat disreputable, perhaps. There are all sorts of stories about how she got her start in politics. I'm not going to get into it. This is a family show. However, the conservative media, at least, maybe even some of the honest brokers in the independent media, will point out that this woman has a little bit of a dodgy political past. Do you think, for instance, the name Willie Brown is going to come up? I mean, do you think that the early days of Kamala's political career are going to come back to haunt her in any substantial way over the next 3 months?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Kamala Harris and her team do not ever want to talk about Willie Brown. She's tried to bury him for years, for decades, as she's been trying to move her political career forward. But look, there's a huge part.
For those who don't know, Charlie, I suspect a lot of the audience knows, but would you maybe give a little introduction to Willie Brown?
Sure. Willie Brown was running as mayor of San Francisco when he first started dating Kamala Harris. Willie Brown's 60 years old. Kamala Harris is 29. Willie Brown is still married, but estranged from his wife. So Willie and Kamala have this year-long relationship where he parades her around as a potential steady girlfriend, and to all the high society people and donors and voters in San Francisco, really helping and even offering her some high paid positions in state government that paid her a good deal of money. So there would be no Kamala Harris without Willie Brown. He really put her on the stage and set her up for her start.
Do you think it becomes an issue, or do you think the establishment media just successfully bury it?
Oh, the establishment media is done with Willie Brown because the vice president's office is furious anytime someone tries to make that part of the story. But you're going to see conservative media talk about it, and people should be talking about it. And that's why I wrote the book, because you have to understand the relationship between the two if you're going to understand the rise of Kamala Harris.
So forget about whether or not Kamala beats Trump for a second. Do you think Kamala even outperforms a debilitated Joe Biden?
That's a good question, because right now we're looking at the three major states, right? Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Can Kamala Harris garner enough support there more than Joe Biden? And that'll be what the interesting thing that comes up in the polls. One thing that Harris's advisors suggest is, because of her identity, maybe she'll perform better in states like North Carolina or Georgia. Maybe she might cut down Trump's margin there. But ultimately, going to take a huge amount of work to get her up to speed and get her ready to appeal to the voters in those three major swing states.
So you've studied the woman. If she does become the nominee, and if, we hope against it, of course, but if she became the president, what would that look like? Who is Kamala Harris? What does she believe? What are her priorities? What do we have to fight against and potentially dread?
Well, she's 100%. Her number one goal is the issue of abortion. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, she's made that her sole political focus as she's been campaigning across the country on the issue of abortion. It'll be the number one issue. If elected president, it'll be the number one issue that she starts her presidency on. She wants revenge for that decision. She wants Roe v. Wade completely codified back into law, and she wants to punish Republicans for doing it in the first place. So I do see it as a very hostile, very aggressive push towards that on that issue, and certainly to continue on with and defend the entire Biden agenda that's passed so far.
That is very unfortunate because, one, it's an evil position to make your raison d'etre in politics, but also, I'm as pro-life as they get. When abortion has come up on the ballot since the overruling of Roe v. Wade, the pro-lifers have not fared very well. So I'm sure Kamala Harris is going to want to make this election in some ways a referendum on abortion. You can see Trump trying to choose his words carefully on abortion. He is the most pro-life president we've ever had. First sitting president to show up to the March for Life, appointed the judges who overruled Roe v. Wade. So he's got very good pro-life bona fides, but he's trying to minimize how he speaks about it because, as he said, you got to get elected. So you could see her even leaning into that. Charlie, thank you so much for coming on. The book is Amateur Hour. Everyone go out, get Amateur Hour today. Charlie, I suspect the one really nice thing out of all this news today, I suspect you're about to make a lot more money. So that's good. And then people can learn more about Kamala Harris as a result of that. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.